Hello, it's good to see you again. I'm sorry I didn't get to this story over the weekend. Um, I was going to and then I didn't, so I'm sorry. Anyway, we are up to, I think this is part 16, and every part is a little different as far as the number of pages I read or how long it is. This one is going to be what, almost 30 pages. So we are on chapter 143. We are getting very close to the end. We're on page 691. So we're getting there, and we've come a long way, and it's really great that we've made it this far. It's taken a while, but we're getting there. Okay, so I'm just going to start. Chapter 143. Aiden watched the Volkswagen bus pull into the parking lot. "That's a good girl," he said to himself. Liddy got out first. She and the other three stood there beside the bus, not sure where to go. The meeting wouldn't start for another 10 minutes or so, and Aiden could tell they were hesitant to actually go inside the church. Carl rolled up on his Harley beside Aiden. "Nice day, isn't it? Except for the snow." Aiden watched Liddy and the others slowly start to move toward the church. "It's a good day for you, I'm sure." Carl followed his gaze and grinned. "What's she doing here? I thought she was done with this place." "I asked her to come. There are a few more things I'd like her to see." Carl parked his motorcycle. "Like what? How this church really ought to be run? How God can move mountains through the right man? All that good stuff?" A parishioner shouted a greeting to him from across the parking lot, and he waved. Aiden nodded. "I think your addition to this story will round it out nicely." "Hey, maybe you could have her come see me after the meeting. Let me talk to her about a few things." "Oh, that would be wonderful," Aiden said. "Where's Denali?" "He's inside. I think he's talking to Ruby." Aiden crossed his arms. "So, Carl, how does it feel?" "You mean finally getting everything? Finally making it? You wanted Charles's life. Now you're living it. What's it like?" Carl looked back at the church. "I have thousands of people who are going to look up to me. I have a gorgeous house, cars, a whole staff of guys at my beck and call. Money, oh, the money. God, I inherited this ministry and became a millionaire. There'll never come a time I'll never want for anything again. Ever." Aiden smiled at him. "No, you won't." One of the single brothers came running out. "Pastor Steele! Pastor!" He got closer before continuing. "Pastor Steele, it's almost time to start. Everybody's ready." "Well, I'm not. Can't you see I'm in the middle of something?" "Yes, sir. I'm sorry." The man bowed and backed away, then ran back inside. "I heard you've asked Ruby to make the announcement this morning," Aiden said. "Where'd you hear that?" "Oh, right. Yeah. I figured it'd be more effective coming from her. I've got some guys over working on the house right now, and I really need to be over there. I'm not actually staying for the meeting." "Really?" "No, why should I? It's going to be pretty cut and dried. Anyway, I know if I leave those guys alone for too long, they'll break something or tear down something that's supposed to stay. They're like little kids. You can't leave them alone for 5 minutes. Good thing they're not doing this for money." "Who's working on your house?" Aiden asked. "The single guys." "Have they been told about Charles?" "I'll get to it. They'll hear it when they get back to the church if I forget anyway. People will be running around like chickens with their heads cut off, screeching and bawling for God knows how long. I may let the guys break for lunch around 1. They'll find out somehow. Don't worry. But if you'll get Liddy to meet me at the house, tell her to come on up there after the meeting lets out. I'd love to talk to her. I'll give her the lowdown on everything. I tell you, I'm going to get this place in shape." I bet so," Aiden said. Most everyone was inside by that point. "Did you stop by here for some specific reason?" "I just wanted to see what kind of turnout we had," Carl said. He got back on his motorcycle. "Good enough." He looked out at the parking lot. "It's like a Sunday morning service. Charles's last hurrah." He started the bike. "Seriously, though, send Liddy over to the house. She needs some positive stuff about somebody to put in that book. Okay? I'll see what I can do." Aiden went inside the sanctuary and spotted Liddy and the others moving down the main aisle with one of the ushers. They were seated about halfway back, and Aiden caught Liddy's eye. He waved at her and smiled, and she quickly looked away. Chapter 144. Of course he'd be there. He was everywhere I went all of a sudden. It wouldn't have surprised me for him to appear in the shower with me at that point. Andrea couldn't be still. She kept fidgeting in her seat and looking back at the crowd in the pews behind us. "They're supposed to start at 10, she said. "What time is it now?" "It's about 5 till," I told her. I'd brought my notebook with me, forgot the tape recorder, and I opened the notebook to a clean page. I took a pen out of my purse. Aiden said he'd answer any questions I had, so I decided to take him up on it. I held my pen poised above the paper and looked around. This whole place was his work. The building, the pews, the pulpit, the collection plates, even that one bathroom stall in the women's restroom that was always messed up. Aiden had made it all possible. I wondered how much of it Pastor Faust could have gotten without help. Probably none of it, because he'd have either ended up dead or in jail long before he did, with Aiden helping out. What did I want to know? Andrea and Veronica were busy talking, and Drew was looking around at the crowd, so I put my pen to paper and started writing whatever came to mind. Number 1, how do you make a deal with Satan? Who approaches whom? Number 2, why trade your soul for a church? Number 3, do you have a last name? And in parentheses, Aiden. Number 4, what do you really look like? Aiden in parentheses. Number 5, what is hell like? Number 6, what is heaven like? Number 7, is Christianity quote-unquote right? Number 8, how do you get from one place to another? Talking to Aiden. And number 9, how did you... One of the single brothers walked out on stage just then, so I put my notebook away. He took the microphone off the stand on the pulpit and tapped it twice. "Hello? Hi, thanks for coming." The noise in the sanctuary died down quickly. "Pastor Steele wishes to send his apologies that he can't be here, but he had to be somewhere else this morning to attend to some very urgent business. But now I'd like to introduce Sister Ruby Faust to you. Sister Faust?" Ruby came out from behind the curtains backstage, and everyone jumped to their feet and cheered. Andrea and Veronica slowly stood, looking around, and clapped half-heartedly. They looked like they were embarrassed both for standing and for not wanting to stand. They didn't know what to do. Drew and I sat right where we were. She took the microphone from the brother before he disappeared behind the curtain. People were still cheering for her. She looked out at the crowd, and even from 14 rows back, I could see she wanted to run like hell out of there. I knew the feeling. "Good morning," she said, her voice shaky. She held the microphone with both hands. Everyone sat back down. "Thank you for coming. I wish this could be... I'm sorry this meeting couldn't be for a happier reason, but I really am sorry to have to tell you this. Charles went to be with the Lord last night." The commotion in the sanctuary was unbelievable. People were screaming, crying, writhing on the floor, tearing at their clothing. You name it, and somebody in that room was probably doing it. Ruby watched for a few minutes, then laid the microphone on the pulpit and walked off stage. Andrea and Veronica stood up so they could see everybody better. "I bet Pastor Steele's here somewhere," Drew said. "I was really looking forward to hearing that speech. You know how he is." "I can't believe he didn't want to hog the spotlight," Andrea said, "especially for an event as important as this." Some lady with makeup streaking down her face came running up to Andrea and hugged her. Then they wandered off together, Andrea holding the other woman up and comforting her. Veronica looked at me, and then at Drew, and then followed her sister. Drew put her hands on her hips and looked around. "This is bullshit," she said. "What a waste. Is that it?" "I think so," I said. "Now what?" "Now I don't know. Want to go smoke?" "Here? No. Well, let's get out of here then." We wrestled our way out of the sanctuary and back outside, then stood by the curb at the main parking lot. Aiden appeared beside me. "Can we go somewhere?" "I can't," I said. Drew had no idea he was there, obviously. She didn't ask me who I was talking to. "Drew's with me." "No problem," he said. And Stuart, her cousin, pulled up in a van right in front of us. He reached over, opened the passenger door, and asked Drew to get in. She said goodbye to me and took off. Aiden and I were alone on the sidewalk. "Do you have your questions for me?" "My questions?" "The questions you jotted down while you were waiting for the meeting to begin." I flipped my notebook back open. "Right here." "Will you take a walk with me?" That depends. Where are you going? To Carl's house. We can talk there. The road down to the church and the main road had been plowed and salted, so what the heck. We walked up the drive to the main road and turned left. I noticed that no one was leaving the church. Are they really all still in the sanctuary? I asked as we walked along. This is a tremendous shock to them, Aiden said. You were there and saw it happen. You had a feeling it was coming beforehand. He turned and pointed back to the church. They've been blindsided by it. I guess that's true. For all the grief in that church right now, Aiden said, there are people who are secretly relieved that he's dead. People he hurt, like Ken and your brother, but they don't dare show it if they're still a member. They have to keep it to themselves. We walked in silence for several minutes. Thank you for coming, Aiden finally said, and thank you for trusting me. I just kept walking and looking straight ahead. I gave Ken my car, he said, and I mentioned to you that I had something for you too. I glanced at him. Your gifts come at too high a price. The car came with no price, he said. Your gift is also free. Well, thanks, but no thanks. I don't need anything. He shrugged. Let me know if you change your mind. I nodded and we kept walking. I started to wonder if we were ever going to get there. We passed the single brothers' apartments. You know, Carl chose not to come to the meeting this morning, Aiden said. Why's that? Because he doesn't care about his parishioners. He only wanted them because they were Charles's. And now that he has them, well, never mind that. Here we are. There were several large pickup trucks parked in Pastor Steele's driveway. They were from some landscaping company in Fisher. What's going on here? I asked. Waste. I saw a few of the single brothers that I recognized working around in the yard. They didn't look us in the eye or speak, but I could feel them staring at Aiden and me as we walked into the house. The foyer and living room were empty. I thought you said Pastor Steele didn't go to the meeting, I said. He's in the hot tub at the moment. Oh. Aiden motioned to the leather sofa. Have a seat here. I sat down. Are you all right? Would you like a drink? Something to eat? No, I'm fine. I grasped the notebook tightly. Then we can get started. He sat in a recliner across from me and crossed his legs. What's the first question? I wondered, can I really ask you anything? Anything. He looked off and then back at me. Well, I may not give you an answer, but you certainly can ask me anything you'd like. Okay. I looked at the list of questions. Here we go. How does a person make a deal with Satan? Do you approach them or do they come looking for you? Aiden smiled. We come looking for you. Only a few. Wait, I said. Hang on just a second. Why bother doing this deal with the devil thing at all? There must be thousands of people dying every day who just go to hell by default. Why waste people or angels like you to come down here and spend so many years with one person? We like to get as many people as we possibly can. You probably learned something to that effect in Sunday school as a child. Satan likes to pack 'em in. We go after people who can bring lots of others with them. Our own ministers, really. That's what Charles was. But he was the founder and leader of a Christian church, I said. How can you say that? He was the founder and leader of a very organized, effective cult with a Christian-sounding name. He could draw people's allegiance away from God and take it for himself, and that's the sort of person we're most interested in. His parishioners worshipped him and his rules, not God. Anyone who can keep people from following God are our greatest assets, and they're worth all of the energy and resources we invest in them. The return is spectacular. So wait, why would Pastor Faust want to trade his soul to be a daggone preacher in the first place? That makes no sense. What should he have traded it for then? Well, I don't know. Maybe to have lots of money and to never have to work again. Pastor Faust worked his ass off around here. He never just sat around and basked in anything. Do you think you'd like to just sit around and bask for the rest of your life? A few years of it wouldn't be too bad. Charles didn't want that, and he knew that from the beginning. He wasn't very well educated, but he was a smart man all the same. He learned from a very early age that there was great power in the church. His mentor, Lester Hammer, taught him that. Unfortunately for all those young male parishioners in Charles's church, Lester taught him some pretty perverse ways to gain and maintain power over his men. I guess there really can be a lot of power in being a bishop or pastor or whatever, I said. If you think about it, it'd be easy to put yourself before God in the eyes of your congregation, especially if you're as charismatic as Charles was. I'm getting a bit off the subject, Aidan said, but we have essentially a 3-generation greed and power struggle here. Lester started it being the pastor of a Pentecostal church in North Carolina where he abused young boys and made them see him as God. Charles continued it, taking it to a whole new level with his big mega church that we have here. And Carl's taken over the empire now that Charles is dead. Carl's a jerk. I never have liked him. I glanced around to make sure he wasn't in the room. I may have thought he was a jerk, but he still scared me a little. What's going to happen next? A 4th generation? Let's not get into all that. You asked who approaches whom. People ask without actually asking. They think the right thoughts and say the right prayers. God's not the only one who listens to your prayers, by the way. When it's worth our while, we come. We, meaning angels like you, I said. Yes. And you said you got your orders from another angel. That's Satan? Yes. Does he know you're here with me right now? He's the prince of the earth like me, like Denali and the rest of us, with more power. He knows we're here together, and it's all right. You're doing the right thing. The right thing for who? For everyone. Me, potential future cult members, former Open Arms members, everybody. How can that be? We've already discussed that, Aidan said. I want to wipe out every positive thing Charles ever did. You want to write a book that helps prevent other people from being recruited into cults. Everybody wins. But why would you want to stop people from being recruited into cults? Don't those people eventually go to hell? Not all of them. Getting you involved was my personal choice. I want to see you wipe out every good thing about Charles. And if I lose a few souls in the process, so be it. No offense, but your book won't stop people from being recruited. At best, all your book can ever hope to do is make a small dent for a brief window of time. It's worth it to me to let you do that. Wow, that really makes me feel good, I said. I can't wait to get started. Do you know how many people are approached by cult members on this planet every day? No, I said. Over 3,000. 3,000. A slight dent in that number can still be very impressive. Don't let it hurt your feelings. I was just answering your questions. Are you ready for the next one? Go ahead. I looked down at my list. Why would anybody want to trade in their soul for a church? I guess we already answered that one. I think so. Okay. Why do you have a last name? You're an angel. Is there some law against it? He asked. Well, no, but you don't have parents to give you a last name. Well, where did my first name come from then? I huffed. I don't know. I just want to know why you have a last name. What purpose does it serve? Well, what purpose does it serve for humans? It differentiates us. It lets people know who your family is. Stuff like that. Can't you just answer the question? He smiled. I have a last name because it pleases me. So you named yourself? Just the last name. I knew someone with the name Gervais once. I liked it, so I took it on for myself. You said you could be a woman if you wanted to. Would you change your name? I'd change it for the time I appeared as a woman, sure. So you just decided one day that you'd have a last name, and that last name was going to be Gervais. That's pretty much it. Huh. Weird. All right, then. I looked at my list of questions again. What do you really look like? He glanced around the room. The truth is, I don't really look like anything. Nothing you'd recognize. I look however I choose to look. I'm similar to your concept of a ghost. When I think of ghosts, I said, I think of these filmy, white-looking things that float around and go through walls and stuff. That's about as close as you'll come to understanding what I look like when I haven't taken on a more familiar form, he said. Can you turn into a little boy again like you did the first time I saw you? We need to get on with the questions, Aidan said. Carl will be back soon. Please? He sighed. All right, if you really want me to. I do. Then close your eyes. I closed my eyes for a moment. You can look now. And there he was, that little boy I'd seen when I arrived at the church for the first time. I let out a squeal. Oh, you're so cute. Look at you. Then I had a horrible thought. But you're still... I drew back a bit. How can you look like that and be what you really... How many people do you think I'd convince to give up their souls if I looked that way? He said, the classic horns and red pitchfork. Why would I choose that image? Would you give up your soul to someone who looked like that? I guess not. It was giving me the creeps to see him like that. I wanted to pinch his adorable little cheeks. Can you please change back now? Close your eyes. Thank God he was back to his old self when I opened my eyes again, or the self I was used to. You bring up an interesting point, he said. Would you join a cult run by a pedophile, an abusive tyrant? Of course not. You'd come to one service and never return, wouldn't you? If I came at all, I said. So what do you need to be an effective cult leader? I guess you'd have to adopt the you draw more flies with honey than vinegar approach. You make sure to be nice, attentive, courteous. You treat the new recruit like royalty for a while, he said. A honeymoon period, so to speak, until you have time to indoctrinate them and allow them to invest a little of themselves in the group and in you. Then you lower the boom on them, I said. Well, yes, but slowly. You introduce your rules one at a time. Your first few weeks in the church, they were wonderful, weren't they? Oh, yeah, I said. I thought it was the best thing that ever happened to me in my whole life. Then you started breaking rules you didn't know existed until you broke them. Yeah, that was... I felt like such a failure. Nobody bothers to explain all that when you first get involved. It's like Pastor Faust used to say about boiling a frog. He said you can put a frog in a pot of cold water and then you gradually turn the heat up so they don't notice. Before they know what's happened, you've boiled them alive. I think he was talking about what Satan does to trick us or something. Aiden laughed. I remember that sermon. It's one of the best ones I ever wrote. I like little inside jokes from time to time. You wrote that? I wrote all of Charles's sermons. No way. Hold on. Sorry. There's more. Sorry. I tried letting him do it, but he couldn't string two thoughts together coherently, let alone an hour-long talk on the Bible. His attempts were just a mishmash of ideas and, well, crap, to use your word. Who wrote all his sermons before you? I asked. He managed to get by. If it weren't for his theatrics and charisma, he'd have had no congregation at all. Man, I said, I had no idea. Have I answered your question? I couldn't even remember what my original question was. Let's just move on to the next one, he said. Okay, what is hell like? What do you think hell is like? He asked. It's hell, I said. Just awfulness for eternity. Lots of fire and stuff. Do you think that just because that's what you've been told? Well, what else do I have to go on? I said. That's all anybody has. It's not like I've had a personal experience with it. Aiden sat back a bit and gazed up at the ceiling. Hell is well, we customize it. We tailor it to the individual. Hell for you wouldn't be the same as it is for, say, Charles. What was hell for him? I asked. Hell for Charles was seeing the gates of heaven and being pulled away, never to return. He got a glimpse of his old friends, family members, his parents, grandparents. They were all there, and then they faded away. Now he has darkness, silence. No one to look up to him like a god and cater to his every whim. It truly is hell for him. And that's all he'll have forever? I asked. I'll throw a few serpents in there with him occasionally for variety. Jesus. What would hell be for you? He asked. I don't know. Maybe standing in line at the post office for eternity? I think I've come close to doing that in the past already. We go to a great deal of trouble to make sure that eternity is as unpleasant as it can be. So hell isn't just some made-up place to scare people into going to church, I said. No. Well, what is heaven like? His jaw clenched. It's the exact opposite. What is there? And for me, it's unattainable. Let's move on. Okay, sorry, I said. Is Christianity right? Do you mean, is it the true religion with a capital T? Yeah, I think that's what I meant. What do you think? I rolled my eyes. Would I ask these questions if I knew the answers? No. Well, all right then. There are many different forms of Christianity, he said. They won't all be the right answer. Perhaps none of them are. I can assure you that Charles's brand of Christianity wasn't the one true religion. Other than stating that, I'm going to have to decline comment. I'll leave it up to you to figure out the answer if you really want to know. Can't you at least point me in the right direction? I'm an agent of Satan, Liddy. Why would I do that? Because you like me, because you've used me, and I don't care how you look at it, you used me and deceived me. You could at least help me out a bit. I'll help you out in other ways, not that one. All right, whatever. This is my last question. How do you get from one place to another? I simply think it. I think, and then I'm there. That's it? That's it. It's the same as making tornadoes, moving objects, and creating little red cars. Can you create an ashtray right quick? I asked. He nodded at the table next to the sofa. Look there. There was a small marble ashtray. That's beautiful! It was already there, actually. I pulled my cigarettes out of my purse and lit one up. Carl won't mind, will he? No, he smokes cigars in here every night. Well, they were originally Charles's. We were silent for a moment. I sat up a bit and looked around the room. The log cabin motif that Pastor Faust had originally designed was gone. Now it looked like a governor's mansion or a rap star's house. It was exquisite. I can see where all this would be appealing enough to some people for them to trade their souls, I said. But once you meet an agent of Satan and you find out all those Bible stories are true, there really is a hell and you really can't go there forever, who in their right mind is going to do something that'll guarantee they'll end up there? I mean, you meet an agent of Satan and they explain the deal, so it's not like you don't know. Am I making any sense at all? It's a good question, Aiden said, but with people like Carl and Charles, they either can't or they won't look beyond the present, wanting things that they know they'd never be able to get on their own. Charles wanted prestige, people to look up to him and would do whatever he wanted them to, and sex partners. He got that, a nice house and a big church. He knew in the back of his mind that it'd end one day. He just chose to ignore it and enjoy the present. The closer he got to his time to go, the more desperate he was to hang on to life. He was more desperate than most, and he went behind my back and made that deal with Denali that he evidently thought I'd never find out about. I'm rambling. But yes, Liddy, people still take the bait and give up their souls. They do it all the time. I tapped my cigarette on the side of the ashtray. Where will you go next, after you leave here? I don't know yet. I'll still be in the United States, probably somewhere out west, but I won't know until I give word that I'm ready to leave here once and for all. But what about... Aiden stood up. He's coming. Carl came sashaying into the living room with a towel wrapped around his waist, looking like a little king or something. He saw us sitting there. That was fast. Is the meeting over already? It's been over for at least a half hour, Aiden said. I told you you should have been the one to make the announcement. Ruby just said Charles was dead and then walked off stage. Carl grunted. I told her to talk about renewal, leaving the past behind and moving forward. All that good stuff. She didn't get into any of that? No. How hard would that have been? Just get up there and act like... He looked at me. Oh, well. Has Aiden told you what you get to do now? No, sir, I said. You're in for a treat. Now you get to interview me. Oh. Don't sound so enthused. I'm going to go change. You just wait here. He went upstairs. I looked to make sure he couldn't hear me. Do I really have to stay here? I don't have anything to ask him. Just humor him for a few minutes, Aiden said. Let him do all the talking. I doubt you'll have to say much of anything. Aiden left at that point, and Carl came back downstairs a few minutes later in a sweatshirt and a pair of shorts. He obviously wasn't planning on going outside to help the brothers with the landscaping. It was freezing out there. They had to shovel snow off the entire yard before they could even get started. Carl glanced out the window to make sure they were still working, and they were. He looked at his watch. They've been out there now for about 2 hours. Maybe I'll let him go to lunch in a bit. He winked at me. After we're done, that is. I smiled and fidgeted with my pen. He sat down in the seat where Aiden had been. So Ruby crapped out on me, huh? He snorted. How's that for gratitude? I haven't ever asked her to do anything, and the one time I do... Well, that's just par for the course around here. But she did look sort of upset, I said. It was probably pretty hard for her to get up there and do that. Everybody just freaked out after she said Pastor Faust was dead. It wouldn't have mattered what she said after that anyway. Well, that's why I was hoping she'd save that part until the end, you know? Grease the crowd up really good with a talk about spiritual renewal, a Holy Ghost explosion in the ministry, some coming up higher in Jesus talk. Just whatever. God, how could she do that to me? How could she do what to you? He waved his right hand toward the window. You know, get up there and let me down. She said she'd make a speech and all that. Hey, it was her idea, not mine. I thought you said you asked her to do it. No, I didn't. And Aiden told me a while ago that you'd asked her to get up there. Aiden? How would he know? He wasn't there when I talked to her. He paused. Was he? I don't know for sure, but from what You believe him, Carl said. After all he did and lied to you about? Please. I know he's lied to me, I said. Well, misrepresented the truth is probably a more accurate description of what he did. A lie is a lie, Carl said. I don't care what fancy way you choose to describe it. I had a thought. Maybe I was going to ask him some questions after all. Did Ruby know what Pastor Faust was doing with those men in the church? Carl sat back and stared at me. Did Ruby know? My God, what do you think? Is she blind? So she did know. He rolled his eyes and sucked his teeth. And you spent how many years in college? Did Pastor Faust ever approach you to... He glared at me. Can I talk now? I sat back and put my pen to the paper. Sorry. Go ahead. Thank you. Now, I came into this ministry many years ago, back when I was still... I think I was 18 or 19 when I met Charles. And he showed me the way, so to speak. I remember you telling me about that the first time I interviewed you, I said. Yeah, I talk about it a lot. People seem to like it when I tell that story. I was a drug dealer on the streets in Norfolk when I met Charles way back then. I didn't have a clue what I was going to do with my life, and he really hooked me up. You learn to be observant when you deal. You look at the person's clothes, what they drive. Hell, look at their teeth. If they got good teeth, they got money. You never see anybody running around all nasty and gap-toothed if they've got money. And let me tell you, Charles had the nicest teeth I have ever seen. So what does that have to do with the church? I asked. Will you please hush? Sorry. Jackass. I couldn't believe he actually said that. Let me tell this story, he said. So I met Charles one night. I guess it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and he took me to this bar. It was almost closing time, but he wanted to talk to me about salvation. Well, that's what he said. So we went to this bar and got us a few drinks. Then we went back to his hotel, and he read these Bible verses to me about salvation and baptism in Jesus' name and all that good crap. It sounded all right to me, so I said, yeah, I'll come visit your church. And he got up with me the next morning, and I've been a member of the church ever since. After he finished, he just sat there and looked at me. He wanted me to hush, I thought. I'm not saying a word. I stared right back at him. I must not have seemed impressed enough with his little tale, so he took a deep breath and continued. I went to the outreach center they had there in Norfolk for a while, just long enough to convince Chucky Poo that I was a good worker and he needed me here in Dalton Fisher. And then, I remember the first time I came here to visit and saw all Charles had, you know. He invited me up here. I believe I'd been a member of the church for about 2 months. He bought me a plane ticket up here and everything. I saw the nice cars he had, his big old house, and the church. We were in a different church back then, but it was awfully nice too. And then he called me up to his office the second night I was up here visiting. I was just one of the single guys at the time, so he called me up there by myself, you know, just me and him. Then he sits me down and he asked me if I ever masturbated, played with myself. Well, I thought that was sort of a weird question to start off on, but maybe he'd heard something from one of the other guys. Some gossip about me, you know. So at first, I figured I'd have to set him straight. But then he starts talking about how it's okay to have sex with another man as long as you don't love him and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, what's he getting at? Where's this conversation going? You know, obviously he wasn't trying to clear up some confusion about me or whatever. Then he got up from his desk and he came over to me and he started kissing me on the mouth. with his tongue going down my throat. I jumped up. I didn't hit him or anything, you know. I just ran into the bathroom and shut the door. What kind of pastor is this? You know, I was wondering that. So I sat there and I tried to think for a minute, clear my head. Charles didn't come in there after me. I guess guys had done that kind of thing before when he, you know, kissed them or fondled them or whatever for the first time. He cleared his throat. Now, you can't put this in the book that you're writing for Aiden. You know that, right? This is just some background for your own information. This goes no further than this room. I won't tell anybody, I said. Good. Good. I guess I should have made that clear before I even got started. See, it's not that I thought what Charles did was 100% wrong or anything, because I honestly thought that he believed it in his heart. Or that's what I told myself back then when he first started doing it with me. He showed me the Bible verses and all that. And who was I, this former low-life drug dealer, to question a man of God? But after I'd been living up here about a month or so, I really believed he thought he was doing the right thing. Or at least he was doing something that wasn't a sin against God. But then he brought other guys in on it. We were doing it in his office one day, and he called 5 other guys in there. He hadn't ever done that before with me. I guess this was maybe 2 months into it. 2 months of me living here full time. And it was like what Eduardo said when he testified in court. Do you remember what he said? He said Charles told him he was special. He said Charles told him that he hadn't ever done that with anybody other than him, so it made Eduardo feel really unique, like he was helping to keep this anointed man of God from fornicating with women or having a wandering eye. Well, Charles told me that too. I thought I felt like it was my duty to keep him pure, you know? I guess it never occurred to him to ask how come Pastor Faust didn't just turn to his wife. This is Liddy talking. Asking Pastor Faust questions like that was probably like interrupting Carl when he's telling you a story. You just don't do it. I let him continue. So he calls other guys in. There were 5 of them. And then he sits down in his chair there behind the desk. And Carl paused and stared off into space. Well, he had all 5 of those guys, you know, have their way. They got to have sex with me while Charles watched. His fists clenched into white knots. And it hurt. It really hurt. But I didn't say anything. I bit my lip as hard as I could to keep quiet so Charles wouldn't be disappointed in me. He told me it was a test and I'd get special privileges if I passed it. But it hurt, Sister Lydia. God Almighty. I bled for 3 days after that. I winced. I wanted to say something, but I didn't know what. And sometime between me sitting there in that bathroom stall and when those 5 guys, you know, something inside of me died. I lost some good part of me. I didn't care about serving God anymore after that. I didn't want to be a minister. I didn't want to help people. Any God that would allow something like that to go on doesn't deserve anybody's help down here on earth. Maybe I take revenge a little too far. I don't know. But I decided sometime after that episode with those other guys that I was going to take that man down. Then he started laughing. I just had no idea how much it would benefit me back then, you know? But then one day, Charles introduced me to Aiden, and that's when the fun really got started. I found out the deal with Charles and Aiden, and I wanted to get me a piece of that action too. But I took my time. Yeah, I was careful. I kept on kissing Charles's ass and doing whatever he wanted me to do. I was his little bitch for years. I brought in other guys I thought he'd like, and I let him use them too. I got in with the right people, and then I got my own fellowship down in Baton Rouge. Then one day, Aiden comes to me out of the blue and asked me if I was up for what Charles had done. I said, hell yeah, man. Why not? Felt like I didn't have anything to lose. So we did it, and that's when Denali came around. I told Denali I wanted everything Charles had worked for, built up, saved, just everything he had. I wanted Charles to be left with nothing. And look what happened, sister. He died alone in prison in the aftermath of a child sex abuse scandal. You can't ask for much more than that. He was overcome with a fit of laughter for a moment. I think all I did was sit there with my eyebrows raised and say, whew, or something like that. He calmed down a bit. And hey, do you know how I know I'm smarter than Charles was? I shook my head. I know I'm smarter because I can see the big picture. You know what the big picture is? The big picture is knowing how to ask for things. You've got to be specific. Charles should have at least been a little bit suspicious when Denali came to him and offered him a longer life. Charles was getting scared back a couple years ago because he knew he was running out of time and Aiden would want to take him on, to the other side. Well, he didn't feel like he was ready, so when Denali came and told him he could live longer, Charles jumped at it. We knew he would. I'd feel guilty about tricking him like that if I didn't hate the son of a bitch so much. He giggled and reached in the humidor by his chair for a cigar. He clipped off the end and lit it. You want one? No thanks. Your loss. So Charles took Denali up on it, only Charles was too stupid to ask why Denali would offer him that at no cost. Just a freebie. And Denali didn't owe Charles anything. Why would he do that unless he was up to something? It's not like we're working with a square deal kind of person here. But anyway, and that was what I wanted. I wanted Charles to take Denali up on it so we'd have time to take care of some business. I knew it'd make Aiden mad when he found out about it too, and then maybe Aiden would get in on the destruction a little bit. And that's when he brought you into all this. Are you taking notes? I had scribbled down a few things in an outline to keep track of what he was saying, but not notes, really. No, sir. No notes, he said. If this got out, I'd have to come looking for you. You just put that notebook away and... Wait. Tear out that page you've been writing on. Give it here. I tore it out and handed it to him, and he stuffed it in his pocket. We can't let information like this fall into the wrong hands. Most people aren't spiritual enough around here to fully understand it the way God intended without their pastor's help. He giggled again. I love telling people that. It just tickles me to no end. You parishioners sitting there in church, and I can all but call you a bunch of dumbasses, and you stand up and cheer. I looked at him funny. How do you mean? I'm sure you've been in service when Charles or I have said something to the effect that you need to come talk to us if you have a prayer request, because we're the only ones who know what God really wants for you. We have the power of discernment. You don't. You don't have enough sense to know if it's God or Satan or the Michelin Man talking to you. You need to hear it from us, because if it's something God really wants, if it's something God really wants you to have or do or whatever, he'll come tell us first. That was true. Pastor Faust really didn't encourage praying for things on your own without consulting him first. Problem was, there were so many parishioners that you usually had to leave your prayer request with somebody at the front desk, and it'd be months before Pastor Faust got back to you, if he got back to you at all. I guess it's a good way to keep people from dreaming too much, or as Grandma says, getting too big for your britches. Get them to believe you can't divine God's word without Pastor so-and-so's help, and you got them by the short hairs. But that's off the subject, Carl said. All of this is, really. I wanted to give you some inside information, just for your own personal use, so you'd know what all I had to go through to get here. Nobody else knows what you know. Nobody but Aiden and Denali and me. So you should consider yourself pretty special, in my opinion. That's a fact. What all I went through to nail Charles was impressive, huh? It certainly was a lot, I said. Yeah, well, I figured something had to be done about him. He's been doing this to kids like Eduardo for over 20 years. That's the problem with Christianity. Well, one of the problems. You get this turn the other cheek mentality pounded into your skull long enough, and then you feel like it's not your place to pass judgment on somebody or get them back for what they've done to you, because it's God's job to handle all that sort of stuff. Like God didn't give us a brain. Like God doesn't want us to make decisions and kick ass every once in a while. Take care of business, you know? I wasn't about to stand by and watch him get away with what he's done, Carl said. I put a stop to it as soon as I could. I mean, except for the minors, the law can't do anything about it. If it's adults over 18, nobody's going to stop them. And with it going on in a church, nobody'd have believed me anyway if I'd tried to report him for what he was doing. Hell, even the people in the church thought he was this great guy who'd never do anything like that in a million years. So you couldn't even get support there. No, I knew I'd find a way to stop him. He took away my life and my youth. I was going to take away everything he ever had or ever even thought about having. He puffed on his cigar. And here we are, sister. Look around. I set my sights and I took down the target. Now all I have to do is sit back and enjoy it. He happened to glance out the window and then sat up quickly. I saw a car pull up in the driveway, and one of the brothers working out there stopped and opened the passenger door. Ruby stepped out and headed toward the front door. "What is she doing here?" Carl went to the door and opened it before she had a chance to ring the doorbell. Ruby came on inside. "I mentioned wanting Charles's cufflinks last night," she said, and she glanced at me. "Do you think I could get them? I need to make sure they're delivered to the funeral home on time." Carl sighed. "I don't know where they are. Can't you just use some different ones?" She looked down at the cigar in his hand. "I was really hoping to find them in time." "Wait here, then." Carl took off upstairs, and Ruby took his seat. She smiled at me. "They were his favorites," she said. "I want to make sure he has them." She looked around the room. "Carl's made a lot of changes in here, it seems." "Oh," she stood up. "My hardwood floors are gone. What's that?" She walked through the living room toward the dining room. "Tile? Oh, Lord." I glanced up toward the staircase. Carl was still up there somewhere. "Why don't you come back over here and have a seat while you wait?" I said. She came slowly back over to the recliner and sat down. "Can I ask you something, Ruby?" "Yeah." She looked like she was in a daze. "How come you're living in that little house across the river down there?" "Because that's what Carl wanted. He said he was going to build a special place for me to live in while Charles was in prison so I wouldn't feel so alone in this big old house. He said it was for my own good. But wouldn't you rather stay in a familiar place? Did he ask you if you wanted to go over there?" She whispered, "Nobody ever asks me anything." "What are you going to do now?" I asked her. It seemed like she couldn't look at me for more than a second or two. I could live with Hannah and her family. I don't think I could handle living alone, not for too much longer." "Would you consider leaving the ministry?" I asked. "Just packing up and getting out of here?" I saw a light in her eyes that I had never seen before. Her lips parted and she smiled. She almost spoke, and then she saw Carl headed for the staircase. "I found those cufflinks, sis." He came skipping down the stairs, a tiny velvet jewelry box in his hand. "Charles will be so happy." She stood up and took the box. I tried to catch her eye, but she left without saying a word. Chapter 145. Noel almost ran into Ruby as she hurried out the front door of Carl's house. Carl looked out the door, surprised. "Watch where you're going, brother. You about knocked Sis down. And why are you here?" "I didn't know where you were or what you wanted me to do. I told you to clean out those grease pits." "I'm done with that, Pastor. Do you have any work around here that needs to be done?" Some of the brothers who were working in the yard stopped to listen. Carl glared at Noel and raised his voice. "You get back over to that garage, brother, and you stay there till I tell you you can leave." "Yes, sir. I'm very sorry, sir." Carl puffed up a bit and glanced at the other men. "I don't want to see you back over here again today. You understand?" "Yes, sir." Noel bowed low and ran off down the driveway. Carl snorted and crossed his arms. "Just like a bunch of kids," he muttered. "Got to tell them everything at least twice. Y'all get back to work." He went back inside and slammed the door. Lydia, who was still sitting on the couch, jumped. "How am I supposed to get anything done with all these stupid little interruptions?" he said. "I can understand if they needed me for something important, but my God, all the little niggling crap they come up with, like they can't think on their own or something. They know what I like for them to do. If they finish one thing, they can damn well move on to something else that I want them to do. Like that Noel. It's only through my good graces that he was allowed back here. Sometimes I think I'm too generous with those guys. Maybe I should have kicked him to the curb when he showed up here a few days ago, but no. I try to help the boys out when I can, and God knows he won't ever make it out there on his own. He never was too bright. But he could have at least waited out there at the garage and found something worthwhile to work on." He sat back down in his recliner. "Now, where were we? I hate all these interruptions. Stupid stuff. I mean, cufflinks? Who the hell cares? What was I talking about before?" Liddy started to say she didn't know because he'd taken her notes away, but he cut her off. "Let's talk about the future of the open arms." "Ruby seemed like this ministry's has gotten soft in the last few years," Carl said. "You got single brothers living off site, not checking in when they're supposed to, working in unapproved fields. It's horrible. The single ladies are no better. I want to see about setting up some housing for them on campus, too. Maybe on the other side of the river, away from the guys. We could set up some hotel-looking dorms over there. Keep them close by so I can keep an eye on them, you know. Sister, where do you live? I live on Grand in Dalton, Liddy said. The big blue and white house. Oh, that's right. I knew that. Aiden moved you in over there, didn't he? Well, you're not a member anymore, so don't be surprised if you hear about me ripping on you some in service. You're just one of those grubby little infidels now, so I have to talk bad about you. It's just for show, though. But if you were still a part of the church, and hey, it'd be all right with me if you wanted to apply to join again. Liddy chuckled bitterly. No thanks. No? Man, you're really going to miss out. There's about to be a renaissance in this ministry. A rebirth like no church has ever seen before. I'm going to run through this church and cut out all the dead growth like I got the weed eater from hell. The cancerous filth's going to fall away. All those people who just come and sit in my pews once or twice a week and never contribute anything when the plate's passed. All those people who don't ever volunteer or do anything for me. Gone, gone, gone. I run a tight ship, sister. And hey, you know what I might do? This would be a real test of the loyalty of the folks around here. What's that? Liddy asked. I just had this idea just now. What if I called everybody together one night for an emergency meeting and told them the church was going to shut down? Then I could have everybody who wanted to follow me in my new ministry to raise their hands, take a vote or something, and then everybody who voted no could just go on home and never come back. But see, I wouldn't really close the church. I'd just make everybody think that's what I was going to do. Separate the wheat from the chaff. Oh, yeah. I don't, Liddy started to say. With Charles just dying and all the crap that'll go along with that, I guess I'd have to wait at least a week. I know the folks who came up here with me from Baton Rouge would vote to stay, the single brothers. But anybody who wants to obsess over Charles and what a wonderful guy he was, they can just hit the road for all I care. Tighter ship, that's my ministry. There won't be any huggable Jesus mess going on in this church. It is my way or the highway. Carl let out a sigh of relief and stubbed his cigar out. So what do you think? Can I be in your book? Liddy smiled. I'm sure I can find a good place for you. Excellent. Carl stood up. Now I have to go see what's going on with the brothers outside. I see somebody's mixing cement. That can't possibly end well. He motioned to the door. Sister? Liddy walked to the door. Thank you for your time, she said. It was my pleasure. I'm sure you can make it back to the church from here by yourself. Yes, sir. It's not far, he said. Liddy paused. Where's Denali? I don't know. He said something about going down to the garage, I think. Liddy headed out to the road, listening to Carl yell at one of the brothers for spilling quick-reek powder on his Bermuda grass. She was surprised to see that not many cars had left the church parking lot when she returned. How long had she been gone? An hour? What were they doing? Curiosity got the better of her, and she wandered into the sanctuary. Everyone was at the altar, or as close to the altar as they could get, praying for Pastor Faust's soul. Liddy saw Andra down front with two of the sisters, rubbing their backs and crying with them. Veronica was there, too. Liddy stood in the doorway and stared in awe at the sight. This is the hard part, someone behind her said. It was Aiden. What is? She asked. Seeing the fallout of Charles's choice. All the suffering. All these people. Thought you didn't care about that, she said. You care. Somebody has to. Liddy glanced around. Let's get out of here. They walked out into the parking lot, headed for Liddy's bus. Do you know what Carl's thinking about doing? She asked. Having the parishioners submit copies of their bank statements every month? No way, they're already doing that. Are they really? Charles started that about 2 years ago, Aiden said. Newer members like you aren't asked to do it right away. Is that legal? The parishioners are adults, Aiden said. The law assumes that they're competent, and if they choose to share copies of their bank statements with their pastor, that's their business. That's just... God, even if it's not illegal, isn't there something unethical about that? Aiden and Liddy stopped at the passenger door of the bus. People tend to lose their perspective, Aiden said. You see things in your world as either normal or abnormal. If all you ever see is the world of an abusive church, that becomes normal. It becomes a routine thing to show your pastor your credit card statements, bills, your checkbook, bank statements, or anything else the pastor asks for. The parishioners may question it at first, but if everyone else around them is doing it, they go along with it. Well, what idiot really does that? I mean, these are all people who had regular lives in the real world at some point, right? The same kind of idiot who leaves her career and a good life in North Carolina to come worship a pedophile, Aiden said. Oh, that's great. Liddy headed towards the driver's side of the bus. That's really nice. Aiden followed her. I'm just making a point. We discussed this earlier. Cult leaders don't go after idiots. The people who hand over copies of their bank statements are no more stupid than you are. You all thought you were doing the right thing. You thought this is what God wanted, and that doesn't make you stupid. It's fairly noble, in my opinion. Liddy pulled her keys out of her purse. I guess. I could think of a lot more productive things I could be doing with my life, though. More productive than possibly saving thousands of people from being recruited into a group like this? Possibly saving people, she said. There's no guarantee. I could be back at Grandma and Grandpa's fishing right now. That'd be a whole lot better. You're afraid, Aiden said. Afraid? She snorted. Please. An uncomfortable silence followed, and Lydia took a cigarette out of her purse. She lit it. Okay, fine. I'm afraid. Who wouldn't be? I mean, God, you want me to write a book? I don't know how to write anything. You wrote some poetry in high school. Yeah, but it sucked. It wasn't bad for a teenager. That's poetry. This is like a book, you know? It's just a little scary to think about. But you can do it, Aiden said. He opened the driver's side door. Let's go back to your place. I want to show you something. I don't like it when you show me stuff. This is different. Come on. Chapter 146. Aiden sure was staring at me a lot. It was weird. I guess I should have been more afraid of him than I was at that time, knowing what he really was. But he was... It sounds weird to even say it, but Aiden was my friend. I still trusted him. I wasn't at all happy about the fact that he deceived me, but I believed he was there to help me. I know he had his own motives, but still. We were driving back from the church to the little concert hall, and Aiden was quiet and still looking at me. I never did tell you what Carl's thinking about doing, I said. He had his elbow propped up on the console between the two front seats, his chin resting in his hand. No, you didn't. He said he thought he might close the church down and make people decide if they were going to accept him as their pastor. The people who choose not to accept him can leave and won't be allowed back. He said he wouldn't really close the church down. He'd just make everybody think that for a month or two and then reopen. Aiden chuckled. He's separating the wheat from the chaff, removing the cancerous filth from the healthy body of the church. It was something like that, I said. Were you there? No, I was down at the garage. That's not an uncommon practice in cults, though. Carl doesn't have as much imagination as he thinks. But wouldn't that piss off the people who stay? You know, if he gets up there and says that the church is closing down when it's really not, the people who stay won't mind, and if they do, they certainly won't say anything. From the looks of all those people in the sanctuary, I honestly don't know how many people would choose to stay and follow him, I said. He doesn't have the charisma that Pastor Faust had. He's more of he's a jerk. Charles was too at times, but he did have that aura of charm that made people like him more than they do Carl. That's true. I stopped at a convenience store to get a grape soda and a pack of crackers. I was starving. Back on the road, I looked down at my soda and smiled. What is it? Aiden asked. It just feels good to think about something, make a decision, and then carry out a plan without feeling like I have to clear it with somebody else. I was hungry, so I decided to stop at the store and get something to eat. But that's no big deal to most people, I guess. And you were only in the church for a few months, Aiden said. Imagine how people who were in the church for years feel. I can't imagine what it's like for them. Ken especially. He was like Pastor Faust's little slave for over 25 years. Part of me still feels like I really ought to ask for somebody's permission before I do stuff, and here I am, a grown woman. A dog ran out in front of the road. A dog ran out in the road in front of me, and I braked hard. The bus slid a little bit on the slushy gunk in the road, but not too bad. At least we missed the dog. It took me a minute to calm down. "What do you think will happen to Ken?" Aiden asked me. "I think it depends on what happens in the next few months. If he can find a job he likes and can make some new friends, some non-church friends, I think he'll be fine. He'll have his bad days, but overall I think he'll be all right." "Do you think he'll be the type to avoid church or immediately join another one?" I thought about it a minute. "He'll probably join another church. Maybe not right away, but eventually. I just hope he doesn't wind up in another church like the Open Arms. Jesus." "Some people will," Aiden said. "They don't know what to do without the structure and order of the cult. There's always another group out there waiting." I remembered Belinda's friend, the former Open Arms member, mentioning something. I disagreed with her at the time, but in the light of all this new information, I was beginning to see it differently. "Why are all the Open Arms churches near Navy bases? Is there something about the people in those areas that Pastor Faust liked?" "Think about what a young person in the military is like," Aiden said. "Think about Richard. Well, they're away from home, probably for the first time in their lives. Maybe they're lonely, at least at first. They feel out of place. And those who don't want to go out and party every night may feel as if they have nowhere to go," Aiden said. "They may want some spiritual guidance, and along come the Open Arms brothers recruiting on the base," I said. "It's brilliant. It's damn genius." "And most of those military men have a good bit of disposable income," Aiden said. "That's another incentive for the church to invest their time and energy recruiting on the base." "Like you and Denali, they go after the ones who give them the best return," I said. "Exactly." I parked on the street in front of the house. "So what do you want to show me?" "Come on inside." Aiden led me through the house like we were on a tour. "Look at these people," he said as we approached the dining room. Drew was sitting at the table eating cold pizza and drinking a beer. There were about 10 people in the living room having a group prayer. "These are your people. This is what you want to prevent." "I want to prevent what?" "These people are desperate to get on with a normal life. They just don't know how. A lot of them are convinced that they're damned to hell for leaving the Open Arms. They're crippled because of what Charles did to them, Liddy. Maybe if they'd been armed with a little more information when they were first approached by a member of the church, they'd have walked away and they wouldn't be in this predicament right now." We were in the kitchen. I opened the refrigerator door absent-mindedly and stared inside. "That's a lot of pressure to put on one person, you know." "There's no pressure at all," Aiden said. "You're going to be addressing a problem that virtually no one is doing anything about. Anything you can do will help." "And how many people did you say are approached by cult members every day?" "Over 3,000. "I find that hard to believe," I said. "Look at the Open Arms," Aiden said. "They've recruited thousands of people, and it's a church that hardly anyone else in the world has ever heard of. One group can do serious damage, and they don't have to be internationally known to do it. The single brothers from the Open Arms who recruit on the Navy base, just the one here in town, approach probably 75 people every day. Think about all those other little groups out there doing the same thing." "How come you know about all this?" I said. "I mean, what do you care? You already said that all you want to do with this book is wipe out all the good stuff Pastor Faust did in his life." "These are things you'll need to know," Aiden said. "I also have some other things for you. Let's go upstairs to your room." There was a stack of books on my bed. "Where did those come from?" I asked. "I thought you might need them." "What are they?" "Go look and see." I couldn't believe it. There were 10 books there on abusive churches and religious cults. "Are these all for me?" "Of course they are." "Thanks." "They're all reference-type books, case histories," Aiden said. "Unfortunately, that's all that's available to the public right now on the subject of abusive churches." I thumbed through the book on top. "That's a shame," I said. "I really appreciate this, but I don't know when I'll have time to read them." "Oh, you'll have time. Don't worry about that." "Is this what you wanted to show me?" "Actually, I wanted us to take a look at the contents of your safe," Aiden said. "Why do you want to do that?" "Let's just look at it." I went to my dresser and dug the key out from under a bunch of junk in the top drawer. There's nothing in there but some tapes and papers and stuff. Have you been using the dictaphone I gave you? I haven't had time, never mind the fact that people are nosy around here. He took the key from my hand. You won't have that problem much longer. Where's the safe? It's under the bed for now. I try to move it every few days just to be on the safe side. He slid it out from under the bed and wiped the dust off it. You move it every few days, huh? Well, time gets away from me. But I do it whenever I think about it. He unlocked it and flipped the top back. Look here. I was amazed at all the tapes, notes, newsletters, and general stuff. I never really looked in there. I just opened it far enough to throw things in. Is all that mine? I asked. He started taking tapes out and stacking them up in piles. I had at least 30 in there. Then he stacked up all the notes and newsletters and various papers. You've done a lot of work in a short period of time. It looks like more than it is, I said. Really? You have enough here to write several books, I bet. I sighed. Let's get all this put back up before somebody comes in here. Is that what you wanted to show me? I was hoping to cheer you up some. I wanted you to see that you have everything you need to do this. And when, pray tell, am I going to have time to do it? I asked. Having the stuff or the ability or whatever is great, but if you don't, as I said before, he said, you'll have time. We put everything back in the safe and locked it up and slid it back up under the bed. We both sat on the floor and leaned up against the bed. Carl says he runs a tighter ship than Pastor Faust did, I said. He was talking about how he was going to turn this ministry around. He enforces rules and stuff. Aidan nodded. What do you think about that? I think you can't possibly get any stricter than Pastor Faust was. I realize I wasn't in the church as long as some people, but dang, he had those people on a tight leash. And Carl wants to clamp down even tighter? I'll tell you one thing, if he expects to keep people in this church, he's going to have to be a bit more sensitive than he was today. I mean, Pastor Faust just died, and he makes Ruby get up there by herself to announce it, while he's back at the house making the Single Brothers do his landscaping work. It's just not right. Perhaps not, Aidan said. We sat there in silence for a minute and listened to the general racket outside my bedroom door of the other people in the house. I was thinking about the night Pastor Faust died and the look on Ken's face when he choked him. You said people have to make up their own minds, I said. Like, you can't force them to do anything. Does that apply to people like Pastor Faust that you've made the deal with? I have much more control over those particular people, Aidan said. They lose a good bit of their free will, but they never realize it. But like, people in the church, I said. You can't force them to do stuff, can you? No. Well, then how do you get them all to join the church? I simply gave Charles the tools he needed to draw them in. He was charming, personable, funny, and who wouldn't want to join the church I created for him? I got up off the floor and walked to the window. Man, that's messed up. What is? What you did? We've got this super huge church here with thousands of members, and they were all basically recruited by you? An agent of Satan? This is a church we're talking about. Haven't you heard, Aidan said? Satan's everywhere in the church. Yeah, trying to drag people out, not in, but you led them to Pastor Faust. It was what he wanted, Aidan said. I should have been able to tell. It's like this morning, having to sit in that pew. I felt evil all around in that place. It's thick with it. I should have known before. This trick of Satan. Aidan got up and came to my side. One of the biggest problems I have with Christianity is that they give Satan too much credit. He's become the scapegoat for every bad thing people have ever done. Even things that aren't bad, somehow they've managed to become known by some as the devil's work. Like John Denver's CDs, I said. Exactly. There's a lot of that in the church, I said. If you did or said anything that offended anybody in the slightest, it was Satan working through you. Or if you didn't do exactly what Pastor Faust or some higher-up told you to do, it was a control mechanism, Aidan said. That's all it was. I did get a little tired of Satan being blamed for everything, though. He's not as involved in humans' lives as people are led to believe. Us unpleasant things just happen sometimes. Some people are simply mean and inconsiderate. You can't point the finger at Satan all the time. A knot suddenly formed in my stomach. I glanced at Aiden and looked away. "Ask me," he said. "Ask you what?" "The question that just came into your mind." "No, I don't want to know that." "I won't let anything happen to you, Liddy. Don't be afraid. Ask me." I clenched my fist. You hear stories in Bible school as a kid, but what's Satan like? You could form your own opinion. Would you like to meet him? God, no. Are you certain? No way do I want to meet him, I said. He's very charming and pleasant. You'd like him. Satan, charming and pleasant. I seriously doubt it. He sometimes shadows the agents while they work, Aiden said. What for? Just to do something a little different. A holiday, so to speak. And I couldn't finish the thought. You can meet him right now, Liddy. I had to get away from there. I've spent too much time around evil things, I said, and I walked back toward the door. I'm going out for a while. May I join you? Aiden asked. No, just go find somebody else to hang out with. When will you be back? I huffed. I don't know. Why do you have to know everything? Who cares when I'll be back? Where are you going? Out. I grabbed my coat off the hook on the back of my bedroom door and left without saying another word. And I'm going to stop there because I have to go to bed. We are on page, okay, that was said page 718. So we have, I want to say we have 40 more pages, maybe. So we're almost there. We're almost there. We're almost to the end. So thank you very much for watching and listening. We've come a very long way. It's been a long time. So I will be back soon. And the next segment may be the last one. I don't know for sure. It may not be, but we'll see. Okay. Thank you again.